Good evening, family. Merry post-Christmas. I hope everybody survived okay. I know it's a lot, and I know there's a lot of people who are going through tough times. I know the holidays can stir up a lot of emotions for people, and so I'm just lifting everybody up and just keeping many people specifically in my thoughts and prayers, and then anyone else who's going through something, reach out to someone, let them know that you need some additional words of support or care. But tonight I wanted to get back. Hopefully we are in a warning. We are past the halfway point. We are in chapter 5, the second half of chapter 5, and it's really only about 6 or 7 pages, so we're going to jump through that and finish that up. I'm trying to find out what books we should read for the new year. So we're going to wrap this one up. And then, so I'm looking at some, and if you have any ideas, drop them in the comments. Let me know if you have any ideas for some books you want to hear or read. I'm always looking for a new book to read and read a lot. So anyway, so we're in chapter 5, part 2 of chapter 5. The title of this section is Alienating Allies. So let's jump right in. The president's attraction to dictators would be less worrisome if it were matched by an equal affinity for our friends. The opposite is true. President Trump frequently alienates America's most important partners and personally disparages their leaders. His burn the house down exit from the G7 summit in Canada, where he blasted Western friends while en route to meet an Eastern foe, was just one example of his inverted international priorities. Recall that the president repudiated this type of behavior only months before taking office. We've picked fights with our oldest friends, he warned, criticizing Obama's foreign policy. And now they're starting to look elsewhere for help. Remember that, not good. That was his quotes about Obama before this one became president. Allies hoped President Trump would live up to those words. Come on now. And some did admit to us that they felt the Obama administration had given them the cold shoulder. That's our foreign friends. We had an opportunity to win them back. Hope didn't last. Right after the inauguration, President Trump made introductory phone calls to foreign heads of state. His conversation with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, a close U.S. ally, was a sign of what was to come. The Prime Minister pressed the president on whether he would follow through with a deal on refugees previously negotiated between two countries. "This deal will make me look terrible," he reportedly told Turnbull. "I think it is a horrible deal, a disgusting deal that I would have never made." Unquote. Despite the prime minister's attempt to reason with him, Trump shut down the conversation. Quote, "I have had it. I have been making these calls all day, and this is the most unpleasant call all day." And then he hung up. Summaries of presidential phone calls with foreign leaders are typically written up afterwards and distributed within the White House and to other officials with the appropriate clearances. This is standard practice. And we know that now because what? The Zelensky call. Except for the calls they don't want people to get, and then those get put on weird systems. The transcripts help a president's lieutenants to stay in sync with their boss when engaging with the same countries. After details leaked from Trump's early phone calls, the summaries were put on lockdown. The distribution was limited, mostly for security reasons, but also because the content was so routinely and so remarkably embarrassing. No major U.S. ally has been spared from the president's indignities. In private, he pillories partner nations and their leaders and is not shy about doing the same in the open, as in the case of his comments about the Canadian Prime Minister being, quote, "very dishonest and weak," only hours after being hosted by the northern neighbor. He's done the same with France, mocking President Emmanuel Macron on Twitter for his low approval ratings and high unemployment, and with Germany, criticizing Chancellor Angela Merkel's administration for failing to reduce crime and accusing its leaders of being freeloaders that take advantage of U.S. generosity. The United Kingdom, with which the United States has a special relationship, is no exception. After multiple terrorist attacks rocked Britain in 2017, the president scolded the Brits for failing to rein in extremism. Quote, "Another attack in London by a loser terrorist." He tweeted after a train bombing in September 2017, quote, "These are sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard. Must be proactive," unquote. So he's literally throwing shade after people are being killed. Prime Minister Theresa May bristled at the accusation, telling reporters, quote, I never think it's helpful for anyone to speculate about what is an ongoing investigation. In the months to come, her team would become infuriated with our administration, as President Trump criticized May's handling of Britain's exit from the European Union. When confidential internal messages leaked detailing the British ambassador's critiques of the Trump administration, including the apt observations that the president is unpredictable and his White House is dysfunctional, the president proceeded to validate all of the ambassador's concerns with an intemperate overreaction. Rather than showing restraint, he punched down, tweeting that the ambassador was a very stupid guy, wacky, and a pompous fool. For no strategic purpose other than spitefulness, he also took parting shots at May, who was then stepping down as prime minister, calling her policies a disaster. Quote, what a mess she and her representatives have created, unquote. The president said in July 2019, specifically honing in on Brexit. Quote, I have told her now it should be done, but she decided to go another way. The good news for the wonderful United Kingdom is that they will soon have a new prime minister. So I have some people that listen in Germany, shout out to Germany, and I am really curious about what the vibe is there and kind of what are you all's thoughts with regard to policy as far as in general with regard to what's going on here, and also in relationship between the U.S. with Germany now, previously compared to what it's previously been. I'm really curious to see kind of how that spills over into over in Europe, specifically Germany. So shout out to Germany. We have effectively given up trying to block the president's criticisms of our friends. It can't be helped. He wants to say whatever he wants to say, as he does on any other issue. If anything, when he's told not to say something to avoid criticizing a leader directly, for instance, or to keep himself from breaking a promise we've made, Trump will say it louder. After these outbursts, it's embarrassing for Trump lieutenants who need to ask the same foreign partners for help on something, whether it is to catch a wanted criminal or to support the United States in an important vote at the United Nations. Imagine someone announced to a crowd that you were, quote, a pompous fool, and then rang you for a favor. That's the sort of cool reception American officials receive all the time in foreign meetings. President Trump does more than humiliate America's friends. He takes actions or threatens to take actions that will damage them in the long run. For example, Trump has hit Western partners with trade penalties, invoking national security provisions of U.S. law to counter what he says are unfair economic practices in places such as Europe. He was on the brink of pulling out of a trade deal with South Korea in the midst of tense discussions on North Korea, putting the U.S. ally in an awkward position. He threatened to scrape a long-standing U.S. defense treaty with Japan, speculating that if America was attacked, the Japanese would not come to our aid, but would instead, quote, watch it on a Sony television. And he regularly threatens to discard existing or pending international agreements with our friends in order to get them to do what he wants, including displaying personal fealty toward him. You can't overstate how damaging these presidential whims are to U.S. security. Has it caused us to take a major credibility hit overseas? You bet. We see it all the time. Our closest partners are more guarded toward us than ever before, and it causes dissension within our own team. Every time he backhands an ally, top officials complain it's not worth bringing up foreign policy developments anymore with the president. For fear he'll kick over the Lego structure diplomats have patiently built alongside our partners. So everything is very delicate in foreign policy. Everything is strategic and delicate and sometimes built over years and generations and different administrations. And so when one person comes in and just starts flicking and throwing things and saying things without any strategic backing, it's like a Lego structure that over time is going to get knocked down. And it's not just one part, it begins to affect all over, is what he's saying. There's no way, and so what they're saying is they're just avoiding talking to the president. Remember, like the other agencies, they're just not going to bring anything there. There's no way I'm raising that in the Oval Office with him, someone might say. You know it will set him off. This isn't helpful either. The president shouldn't be kept in the dark, yet people worry informing him will cause more harm than good. Others have just decided to resign, unwilling to be party to the dissolution of America's alliances, right? That's just leaving up out of there as soon as possible. President Trump has repeatedly astounded advisors by saying he wants to exit our biggest alliance of them all, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. This would be a huge gift to the Russians, who have long opposed the 29-nation group. NATO has been the backbone of international security for more than half a century, but the president tells us we are, quote unquote, getting raped because other countries are spending far less than the United States to be a part of it, adding that the organization is, quote unquote, obsolete. The president is correct that a number of nations aren't spending enough on defense and that America has carried the overwhelming military burden. But the United States is also the most powerful nation on earth, and the investments we make in the NATO allowance allows us to project our influence globally to stop danger before it comes our way. Leaving the alliance would not only be foolish, but suicidal. An advertisement to foreign enemies that it's open season against Western countries, each left to fend for themselves. His ultimatums were unacceptable to some cabinet officials. Rex Tillerson and Jim Mattis, for example, specifically adjusted their travel plans to reassure America's allies of our commitments, despite counterproductive Trump statements to the contrary. Some might say this came close to insubordination. It didn't. It would have been dereliction of duty to sit by and let our security partnerships wither. And I find it hard to imagine that Trump supporters, who tend to be staunch backers of the military, they say they are, would be pleased if the president pulled America out of the most powerful military compact in world history. They should be grateful there are folks who've talked him down and who've kept a reassuring hand on the backs of our allies. A handful of America's clever partners have decided they don't want to sit around to get attacked and ostracized by the president. They've learned how to play him to maintain good relations and shift the partnership to their advantage. So they're playing him. And remember, we talked about the call or the Canadian footage that was released where they were all basically throwing shade behind his back and he got all worked up. We didn't need to hear the tape to know that they were doing that. Clearly they're doing that. And he's getting played. Our Israeli friends have watched dictators lavish Trump with praise and have learned to similarly cater to his self-conceit in order to get what they want. They've named settlements after him and found other extravagant ways to tell Trump how great he is, habitually exploiting the president's pride to exact concessions. I probably don't need to say it, but we don't want this to become the norm either. I suppose some Americans don't care about foreign policy until a threat reaches our shores. They should care because the actions we take abroad or don't take determine whether the United States is safe in the long run. Our friends are among the best stockades against foreign hostility. We're talking about countries that come to our aid when disaster strikes. They stand up for us in contentious international disputes, that protect our ships, planes, and people, and that are willing to fight and die alongside our troops in remote deserts. They are not, as Trump will tell anyone who cares to listen, out to screw us. We need them. Will Durant argued that the laws of nature, including the survival of the fittest, apply to global politics. In nature, cooperation is one of the keys to winning any competition. We cooperate with our families, our communities, and societies in order to overcome threats. We must do the same on the world stage. Sticking close to our allies, to the United States not only survives, but thrives. But they no longer trust us. Why should they? Like anyone else, they can't predict the president's erratic behavior, and they find that his attitude toward them is demeaning. I know he lies to their faces or on the phone by offering false assurances of his support. He exposes sensitive discussions we have with him, and he tries to bully them into submission. Consequently, many are planning for life without the United States, or worse, how to deal with us as a competitor. The president of the European Council tweeted a viewpoint shared by many of his colleagues in May 2018, writing, quote, "Looking at the latest decisions of @real Donald Trump, someone could even think, with friends like that, who needs enemies?" And that was a tweet from the guy himself from the European Council. President Trump's overall alienation of our closest partners is putting the U.S. at risk. Historically, our partnerships have given us an advantage over other countries. Our enemies have few friends, while America has many. We can't afford a change in that calculus. The next segment is called The Choice. The world depends on the United States to shape history. No person recognized this fact better than Winston Churchill, whose nation depended on American intervention in the Second World War. At the time, he wrote, quote, "How heavily do the destinies of this generation hang upon the government and people of the United States? Will the U.S. throw their weight into the scales of peace and law and freedom while time remains? Or will they remain spectators until the disaster has occurred, and then, with infinite cost and labor, build up what need not have been cast down?" Are we still willing to throw our weight onto the scales of freedom? Will we be spectators, or has President Trump decided we are on the wrong team? That we should be in a small club of thugs or a big club of free nations? The world isn't sure which way we'll go. Surveys reveal America's international image has plummeted under President Trump, and that respondents believe the U.S. is failing to step up to solve international challenges. According to the Pew Research Center, favorable views of the U.S. are at record lows in many nations, and more countries say relations with Washington have worsened, not improved, during Trump's tenure. The reputational free fall stems from confusion the president has created with his words and actions. Under his leadership, it appears the United States is switching sides in global politics. In a July 2018 interview, the president was asked to name America's biggest global adversary. He didn't lead the list with China, which is stealing American innovation at a scale never before seen in history, or Russia, which is working to tear our country apart. Hashtag Russian interference, the election. We know how much he loves them. He led off with a longtime ally. Quote, "Well, I think we have a lot of foes," unquote, he told the reporter. Quote, "I think the European Union is a foe. What they do to us in trade. Now, you wouldn't think of the EU, but they're a foe. Today, the future of democracy is uncertain. Other nations are threatening our place atop the international order. And while it's not automatically bad for us to have peers, it is bad if they threaten our way of life. To guard against their nefarious designs, we must stick together and keep fighting for what we believe. We cannot rely on hope. Hope will not stop Iranian missiles or thwart Chinese espionage. As Kissinger wrote, the goals of America's past, peace, stability, progress, and freedom for mankind, will have to be sought in a journey that has no end. Traveler, says the Spanish proverb, there are no roads. Roads are made by walking. Americans must decide which way we'll walk. If we want to prevail against aggressors, we must be ready for constant competition. We must be unhesitant in choosing between right and wrong. We must be very clear. Our leaders must be very clear about who is a friend and who is a foe. On that account, President Trump has failed us." So that brings us to chapter 6. And so chapter 6, the name of this chapter is called The New Mason-Dixon Line. And it begins with a quote from Ulysses S. Grant. And I'm just going to read the quote, just as kind of like a teaser. "If we are to have another contest in the near future of our national existence, I predict that the dividing line will not be Mason and Dixon's, but between patriotism and intelligence on the one side, and superstition, ambition, and ignorance on the other." Boy, if he wasn't talking about now, I'll tell you what. You don't have to go very far from this post to your feed, to people, to your dining room table to hear the superstition, ambition, and ignorance that is just flying all over. But the great thing is that we are in control of that. We are in control what knowledge we seek out. We're in control on the research that we do, and we're in control of whom we decide to share with, talk with, listen to, read, and we make sure, and we can control how much we fact check and seek out facts, truth, things that make sense, logic. And we also have the spirit on the inside of us that is able to kind of direct and guide us. That's what he's there for. So anyway, I just wanted to come on quickly because it's been a little while. I was celebrating Christmas and the holidays, and we're coming up on New Year, and we're going to be out of town. And so I'll be jumping back on after New Year. We have, I believe, 3 more chapters. So 6, 7, and 8. And there's an epilogue as well. So stand by. This will be good stuff for the new year. And then we're going to jump into another book. We'll probably take a short break and then jump into another book. But I just wanted to encourage everyone as you're beginning this new year, really consider ways to expand your mind, your spirit, your emotions, what you feed yourself. Find book clubs, groups, places that you can really seek out knowledge, seek out information. When you hear something in the news or you see something on your timeline, make a mental note to do some more research on that and look into it and really kind of spirit check, fact check, emotion check what you're being fed. And I think if we can set aside our pride and our egos for half a second, and whatever party you may or may not subscribe to, if you set that aside for a second and really dig into the human side of who we are, I think we can get to some places of clarity, some places of principle, and some places of integrity as we go into this new year, as a people, as a whole, as a country. And we are not a people without hope. So I don't care who's in the Oval Office. I don't care what's going on. We are not a people without hope, because we are in control of what God has given us jurisdiction over ourselves and our lives. So I just want to speak a blessing over everyone going into this new year, into 2020, and be blessed. All right, y'all. I'm out. Peace.